Welcome to the TriMetric Roadmap, powered by Business Freedom Advisors, the podcast for business owners who want to grow their business and enjoy their life. Hey, I'm your host, Scott Landis, creator of the TriMetric Tracking System and author of Balancing Act. If you're tired of chasing success at the expense of your health, your marriage, or your peace of mind, you're in the right place. On this show, we help you track what really matters: business health, life quality, and leadership performance, all in one simple, powerful system. Because when those get out of sync, everything else starts to break down. Our goal here is to help you align it all so you can lead with clarity, scale with purpose, and finally enjoy the freedom you've been working so hard to create. And if it feels like no one's ever shown you how to pull that off, this podcast might just be the missing link you've been quietly searching for. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the TriMetric Roadmap podcast, brought to you by Business Freedom Advisors. I'm Scott Landis here with Jeff Jacob. And today, we've been on a series about the executive performance side of our TriMetric tracking system. That means that we track 3 different categories of things for our clients, and we track and measure and show dashboards and get things done around business health, executive performance, and life quality. And so we've been on our series, Jeff, on executive performance, and there are 7 domains to each one of those categories. The 7 domains in executive performance. We're going episode by episode. The last couple of weeks, we did a 2-parter on strategic, just because it was a big topic. And today we're diving into leadership presence and emotional maturity. Good to be with you again, Jeff. How are you today?
You too, Scott. Yeah, I'm doing well. This leadership executive performance series is near and dear to my heart, and and it's been fun so far. Looking forward to keep going.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So if we're talking about leadership presence and emotional maturity as one of the measurements of executive performance, the skill set and the growth track that you need to be on as a business leader and founder of a business that's looking to scale or eventually maybe exit. We should probably first start with some definitions. For you, Jeff, I think everybody might have a different idea in their mind of what executive performance, and not that, our definition would be the right definition, but just so that we're all on the same page as we're listening and watching this episode here. For you, what comes to mind when you think leadership presence?
Leadership presence can be a little bit confusing for a lot of people because there's so many different ways to define that. And we're not exactly saying your leadership style. We're not exactly just saying the presence that you have when you go into a room. It's different than that.
Those are probably part of it, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Those are absolutely ingrained into it. But it's more, leadership presence is more about an all-encompassing kind of definition of your ability to really lead people, a team forward, an organization forward. But it's all of those things together to create a more full picture of what your presence, leadership wise, not just personality wise, not just stylistically, but also results and processes, and how those can come into play to really show what your presence is in this organization.
Yeah, I would say the way that you show up as a leader really does have an impact to how the team goes, and basically how the people do in a business really reflects, how that business is going to perform.
Right, absolutely. And we've all been under different kinds of leadership before. We've all grown in our leadership and been different kinds of leaders in the past. And I've had lots of coaches in my life. I've done a lot of work to grow leadership wise. And one of my coaches was talking about some of the key elements that leaders really bring, like encouraging the heart, modeling the way, challenging the process, enable others to act, inspire a shared vision. Those kinds of things that are key elements to a leader. It's not all of them, and I would word them a little differently. That's not a model we're going after, but just that idea of different things a leader brings is a part of the leadership presence, but it's also how you bring the elements of leadership as well.
Hmm. Yeah. So if you're here with us listening, and if you've ever uh, been a part of a team where the way that the leader shows up, or the way that the leader comes into a meeting can be different, and you're not sure which version of that leader you're going to get from day to day, or depending on what time of the month it is, based on where the payroll is or financials are. Um, that if you think to yourself, I wonder if the way that I'm showing up to my team meetings is having an effect on the anxiety of people, or their performance, then that's something that you're really going to want to pay attention to. And hopefully, and I kind of want to challenge you, the listener, that and this is coming from my own. Uh, I do this. I tend to not. I have to work hard at being self-reflective. I'm very empathetic and can tune into others very, very well. But on the flip side of that, I have trouble seeing myself. So I have to work hard at seeing myself. And my default response is, "Oh, I'm good there." If that's you, if you resonate with that, if you're like, "Oh no, I don't need leadership presence and emotional maturity, I'm good." I just want to challenge you to like stay tuned with us. Stick with us here. We want to challenge your thinking, help you find an area to grow in, and like Jeff, you were saying, this is an area where you don't come out born a leader. There is a growth path. Some start out at a higher level than others, but we all have areas to grow. So it's definitely something worth paying attention to and thinking through today.
Yeah. And I would say not everybody's a good leader, but everybody's a leader. If you and how I define leadership is influence, and everybody has influence with other people. And so therefore, it's a matter of how you use that influence, and are you using it well or not. And you don't start, very few people are just naturally good leaders, but it takes work to put into it. And that's exactly why what you're saying is exactly why I put so much work into developing leadership skills, and a lot of self-awareness of who I am and what I'm bringing into the room when I'm coming into a room to lead groups, and or just individuals, is because I always say I'm empathetic, because my empathy, you and I are a
That
good team
wasn't a
there.
stutter. That was on purpose. Say it again.
Yes, I'm empathetic, but I care deeply about people, but the empathy aspect is something I don't really show. And one of the things that's really clear, or really key, as we get into the emotional maturity aspect of leadership presence, one of the things that's really key is knowing where you're weaker in your emotional IQ. And so
Mhm.
I was forced to take an actual test on this. I don't think you need to take a test. There's healthy ways and unhealthy ways to be able to understand yourself and get more of that self-awareness. I've done some unhealthy ones where it's like interviewing the people I lead, a few of them, and acknowledging strengths and weaknesses. And I did find out some interesting things about how I come across when I come into the room. But also, it brought up some stuff where they said, "Oh, I've never realized this about you, but I do feel a lack here."
Mhm.
And that caused more problems than it did solutions.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so there's elements like that that can bring results but aren't necessarily healthy. Um, and there's other ways where I was taking an emotional IQ test, and it helped me to realize that my stress tolerance is very high. I can handle a lot of stress in my life, but my empathy is really low. And so when I'm trying to lead people in a certain direction, I'll just pull them along and say, "Let's go, let's go, let's go," not realizing just the trail of destruction emotionally that I'm leading people through.
Mhm.
And you either have to, you can lead that way, and there are organizations that do that. I'm not going to mention what they are right now, but there's very large organizations that expect a lot from people and don't care about the results in their life. And they do get great results, but those people get burned out really quickly. And so you can lead an organization that way and come up with results, but it's not a sustainable model, and it's not healthy in people's lives. And ultimately, we want to lead people in a way that leads to fulfillment and health as well.
Mhm. When I think about leadership presence, what comes to mind for me is a spectrum of one end of the spectrum looks like, I'm just visualizing leaders that I've worked with, either as clients or been worked with or under. And one side of that spectrum is when I think about leadership presence, looks very chaotic and instability on one
Hmm.
side. And then the other side of the spectrum is very calm and stable and predictable and creates a sense of comfort and in the source of, in from a place of stability and peace comes out of that. Peace and comfort come out of that stability, where fear and anxiety come out of that chaos and instability. So I would say, and again, there's lots of ways to slice this leadership presence. That spectrum is a good way for me to think about it. And when I think about, and probably if you're listening, you're thinking, oh yeah, I know I've had leaders that looked like that chaotic instability situation, and it was stressful, and it did create a lot of chaos within, throughout the organization. And people either, were always afraid they were going to get fired. Some of them got fired and like, oh, sorry, just kidding, come back. It was that kind of chaos. Like that's like the
Hmm.
high, that's like the furthest down that side of the spectrum you can get, where people literally are fearful that are they going to be able to work tomorrow? I don't know, like what the leader's going to show up. That's horrible. So I'm sure people are thinking, like, as you're listening, oh yeah, I've been around people like that. And then there's people that come to mind where you're like, this is what you really want. You want that stoic leadership presence that comes in the room consistently, same either way. If it's fantastic news, yeah, maybe you'll see some elevated, like, um, uh, energy. And if it's horrible news and we're dealing with the reality of painful, challenging stuff, it's still calm and maybe a little bit of, you can see a little mood, but pretty much all in this lane of stoicism. And that's why we pair all that to say, to kind of get us to the next topic of emotional maturity. Like, I would say that the reason we pair leadership presence and emotional maturity is because that's really what's going on there. That leader either has high EQ or low EQ, high emotional maturity or low emotional maturity. And another element that I always speak to is relationship intelligence, which I
Hmm.
think is related to emotional maturity. But relationship intelligence, like, how do you show up to people? How do you build rapport? How do you build communication? How do you build connection? How do you help people get their needs met through the relationship? So let's shift gears and talk about I know you brought up the emotional maturity a little bit, but if we kind of focus the rest of our time on that, what comes up for you?
Yeah, you can't unpair those.
Mm-mm.
Leadership presence and emotional maturity go together. They're
Yeah.
hand in hand. And because the biggest thing that affects your leadership presence is your emotional maturity.
Hmm.
And there's a self awareness aspect that is really important in that. And we talked about that a little bit. And there are multiple spectrums. There's tensions that are not to be solved, but multiple spectrums along the way in there that lead to the chaos or not, and this chaos or stability. And we have to be able to be flexible if we want to be great leaders too, because there's times where our teams are going to need there's self-awareness and also awareness of the people around us, which is part of the emotional maturity relationship dynamics you were talking about. But there's certain times where the organization is going to need some stability. There's times where it's going to feel stuck in a rut, and it's going to need some disruptive innovation
Hmm.
that some people would say looks chaotic, but really is intentional. And so being able, and then there's also the spectrum of how involved is the leader. I've had leaders who are completely absent, and there's a lackadaisical sense to that it brings to the team. But then if you bring it to the level of being just micromanaging, then that can really stifle people as well. And so it's looking at what this team needs and what these individuals within the team need, and being able to adjust what we bring into the room with our leadership presence based on the emotional maturity that we have of being able to be aware of what we're bringing and matching that with what the people need.
Yeah, that's good. We have about 10 or so minutes left. I want to make sure that it's practical and actionable as usual with our podcast here. And by the way, quick commercial for the TriMetricQuiz.com. TriMetricQuiz.com is a place where you can go and you can get um, a quick assessment. It's going to take you 15, 20 minutes to answer the questions, but think about that time as an investment. The ROI on that investment of 15 or 20 minutes of answering some deep questions, that it'll get you thinking about all aspects of executive performance and leadership presence and emotional maturity are built into this. But go take some time, go to TriMetricQuiz.com and get yourself that assessment. It's free. Okay, but I want to make it practical. So, what are some practical things that you do and that I do that help us show up as the best leaders we can possibly be? Because what we do with Business Freedom Advisors is we are plugging ourselves as the leadership team into either a leadership team that is missing some components, or a leadership team that exists, and we're just helping them, take themselves to the next level, filling in some gaps. Um, and so we are consistently needing to be on in the leadership presence space. And I spend a lot of my time throughout my week working on this, making sure that I can show up appropriately for what our clients need, and let
Mhm.
alone what we need internally for our own business. So one of the key things that I'll bring up is I do a process of a weekly review, and the weekly review covers so many different things. But one of the things that I do, and I'll bring AI into this, because my process has been the same for 15 plus years, 15 20 years. But in the last couple of years, I've been using AI to help me take it to another level, which is reviewing. Re, you know, I, we work with multiple organizations. We're not just building our own organization. So we work with multiple organizations, and being able to have a leadership presence in multiple organizations, it requires organization to the highest level. So if I can do this, and if it helps me, it's definitely going to be something that will help you as you apply this to your own business model. But the weekly review simply is just going back to my meetings, looking at my calendar, processing out loud with say ChatGPT or whatever your AI of choice is, and brain dumping. Here's all the things that we've been talking about. Here's the agenda notes. If I've got a transcript of it, I'm dumping that in, and I'm looking for, okay, what did I miss here? My human brain did a pretty good job of taking some notes, but what did I miss? Here's what I got out of it. ChatGPT, what are you seeing that I might have missed? Ask me some challenging questions that will elevate my ability to be on top of this. And the purpose of that review, that is a lot of work. I spend probably an hour or two a week doing that, at least if I'm on my game. And then that sets up my brain. It primes my brain for going into the next week. And when you think about what it takes to be stoic and be able to bring a high level of calm and stability to leadership presence, to me, the main ingredient for that is clarity. The way you show up emotionally is based on what you're thinking. How you feel is based on what you're thinking. So I do a lot of work on that weekly review to get my thinking in order. Okay, what am I certain about? What are my missings? What do I need to know more about? But what are my certainties? Where does my confidence come from? So the feeling of confidence comes from the ability to be clear on what the thoughts are that are driving things forward. So that's just one key component that does that. I've got more, Jeff, but I want to have you speak to, like, what's one practical thing that really moves the needle for you in leadership presence and emotional maturity.
Right. It's so complicated to just answer that and bring exact practicality to this because it's different based on what everybody needs. You really have to be looking at what do they need, and what is my necessary contribution? What can I give them, and what's right for me to give them? Having counseling sessions basically is what a lot of conversations turn into with employees when you're connecting with them isn't healthy. That's not the appropriate place for that. But I always lead every meeting with just how you doing, just a connection, because people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care,
That's
typically.
good.
And so I just start every meeting with a couple minutes of showing them that I actually care about them, and that's important. Like that's where we're starting from, is a level of care for each other. Um, and I don't go solve all their problems. I don't go, if they're having a problem with their dog, I don't go offer to walk it necessarily. I don't take that step, but it's a level of care of just communication in those elements. But it has to be true. It has to be real. Otherwise, people just can smell fake all over you. And so it can start with that. There's also a danger in stoicism to where, in what people think stoicism is, because people think stoicism is a lack of emotions, when that's not what we're talking about with that. We're talking about it not being reactive to the world around us, really, and being proactive in it. And we bring the appropriate, I mean, God gave us emotions, He invented them. It's not that kind of stoicism. It's the stoicism of steadiness, of being able to be intentional rather than reactive, and bringing the correct emotions to the situation. And if there's an organization that is chaotic and is questioning, going through hard times, going through layoffs, they're gonna need some stability, and we have to bring that. And like we talked about before, there's multiple different kinds of emotions that are right for different circumstances. If you're doing a new product release, you don't want to be unemotional about that. You want to bring intentionally the appropriate level of emotion to that, the excitement of that product release. And if we all have to dig in and get these tax returns done this month, then we let's make it fun together. Let's get excited about this goal that we have here, and lead the team with some, instead of them feeling like they are just being drugged along to have to do this project. Things like that.
You said something that really got me excited. Like it's like, if you don't remember anything else about this episode, remember that you had said, instead of being reactive, be intentional. And another way of putting it is, and I'm thinking again about leaders that I've seen on that chaotic side of the spectrum. It's like the situation is happening to them, and they kind of seem like they're in this victim mode a lot. So in order to get to that place of instead of it happening to you, that you are happening to the situation. So if everything shifts and all of a sudden something falls apart, if you lose your biggest client and the team's reporting bad data, happening to the situation, creating the presence that drives the next actions and the thinking and feeling that go behind that for the team. That's where you really have to be on your game. And I just want to I want to go back to what I was saying before about all that time I spend getting my thinking in order so that I can be, have clarity, so that my thinking comes through, and that drives my emotional maturity. I was remembering about something I learned from Tony Robbins, where he basically takes this concept and puts it into kind of a biohack or a life hack, where you change your state in an instant. And he has a thing that he says all the time. He's like, make your move, right? He's like, make your move. And what he trains you to do in his seminars is, like I've done the firewalk thing. And it's all about getting your mind to a place instantly. Like you make your move and you instantly get into this state, he calls it, which all of this is encapsulating, this thinking drives feelings, feelings drive actions and results. But it's in an instant. If you can train your whole system, your biology, your psychology, your physiology, all into a move or a or a trigger that you program into yourself with neurolinguistic programming, you can literally go, boom, I'm ready to walk across these hot coals and, not die and not burn myself. And you can go into a room. And so you can use that as anytime you go into a situation or anytime a shift happens in the atmosphere, you can do a 30-second, 60-second pause, notice where I'm at, and then put yourself back into that presence. Just be thinking leadership presence. How do I get there? And that's something that, requires some training, but it's definitely something that, and repetition, and something that, you want to practice regularly. So unfortunately, we're out of time, Jeff, but go ahead and wrap up and we'll exit here.
No, that's what meekness is. Most people, the meek shall inherit the earth. Most people think meekness is weakness, but that's not the case. Meekness actually means strength under control.
Right.
And when you're able to control the strengths that you have within you, that's great. And there's times when we can't. I got an email recently about a budget request that made me very angry in terms of the attitudes that were being brought at me and to me with it. And I said, and I was going to decline this, but if I would have reacted right there and written an email in response, it would have been unhelpful in the process and in the relationship. And so even though it was irritating for that other person to have a delay in receiving a response, it was better for me to delay and look over it again. And when I was able to look over it again, I was able to see through what it was making me feel and how it was making me react, and not respond in reaction, but really with intentionality and lead it forward. So there's times where we just can't flip in an instant. And so we have to put those guardrails up to know how to actually lead people well with grace and truth.
And I think that's a great segue to next week. So we're going to talk about communication and alignment next week. So we'll carry some of these themes over, and I love that one. Sometimes you got to pause and have some guardrails. So let's talk about that next week. But yeah, so that concludes today's episode of the TriMetric Roadmap podcast, brought to you by Business Freedom Advisors. And again, we want to encourage you, if you haven't done it already, go to TriMetricQuiz.com, get your TriMetric snapshot, find out where you rank on life quality, executive performance, and business health. And it's very informative. It's going to help you see clearly into every area, including what we talked about today. Thanks for listening to the TriMetric Roadmap podcast.
Thanks for listening to the TriMetric Roadmap powered by Business Freedom Advisors. I've been your host, Scott Landis. If you're growing a business but something still feels off, you're not alone. That's exactly why we created the TriMetric Quiz. It's not a personality test, it's a powerful diagnostic tool that shows you where you're in alignment and where things may be silently slipping off track across your business, life, and leadership. It only takes a few minutes, and the clarity you'll gain is a game changer. Go to TriMetricQuiz.com to take the quiz now before the cost of staying stuck gets any higher. Until next time, stay focused, stay aligned, and keep building a business that truly supports your life.